Hello and welcome to the Official Watches YouTube channel. Here at Jardin du Mayfair, heaven on earth for the watch enthusiast, this week I am so excited to announce we have one of my childhood grails in the building. But first, please do hit that subscribe button, guys, so I can keep these videos coming. We are growing week in, week out, and I want to go even further. So please hit that subscribe button and I'll keep them coming fresh and hot every week. So here it is. It's mythical, it's fabled, it's the Rolex GMT Master 1675 Blueberry. I am genuinely excited, like a kid at Christmas, to be reviewing this watch. It's been on my list for a long time, and generally, when reading up on or doing deep dives for a review, the first port of call is the manufacturer for specs. Or if it's a vintage piece, you head straight into the history books, so to speak. The likes of Rolex, Blancpain and Omega will not flinch when they tell you that their watch was worn on the bathyscaphe and C-Lab on the wrists of French combat swimmers, or indeed on the moon. They'll publicise designs, schematics, test results and images of their watches on the wrists of those who were there. So what do you do when you have a watch in your hands that is utterly correct and completely denied at the same time? This is the story with the Rolex GMT Blueberry. It's quite literally a mythical beast, but it's here, and more to the point, it's very real. For watch nerds like myself, and I didn't think I would ever have to invoke wet when discussing horology, but nonetheless, this little watch is a sweet little mystery. So first, a little background. In 1954, Pan American Airways, known as Pan Am, approached Rolex and asked them to design a watch which would display multiple time zones at a glance. They planned to issue the watch to their pilots as they had started to operate transatlantic flights. Research had shown that the ability to read home time and local time had positive effects on the reduction of jet lag, something which was definitely useful when navigating approximately 670 tons of Boeing through the skies. In response to this request, Rolex designed and built the GMT Master reference 6542. This became the official watch of Pan Am and had a red GMT hand, a 38mm case, a plexiglass crystal, radium loomed hands and markers, a gilt printed dial, and most recognisable feature of the GMT, a blue and red movable bezel with 24-hour markings. It was a glorious but flawed reference, as the early models had bakelite bezels which were prone to cracking due to being extremely brittle. This was, however, not the biggest problem though. The radium used to light up the bezel, hands and indices was found to be highly radioactive, which came as a surprise since it had been considered harmless to the extent that radium was actually in toothpaste on the market at the time. As a result of this new information regarding toxicity, all 605 GMT Masters that had been imported to North America were recalled and tested by the Atomic Energy Commission. Radium-painted GMTs were declared unsafe and were promptly reissued by Rolex with tritium, providing the warm but no longer dangerous luminescence. The early run of bakelite radium GMT Masters are now exceptionally rare and highly coveted by collectors. But with the change to aluminium and tritium, we can clearly see Rolex were teeing up the 6542 successor with the reference 1675. Right, before we keep going on the review, I've got to have a look at this thing. I am obsessed with this watch, and I'll give you a few reasons why. Firstly, it was when I first got into watches, I used to read about these, and the 1675 I was totally obsessed with, but the Blueberry was another level, because I couldn't find any sort of real confirmation that Rolex had ever said that they'd actually made this watch with a blue bezel. And I just think that that itself is so special. So I'm slightly lost for words. I can't believe it's here. And this is a bucket list tick box for me, for the channel, of course, and for you guys, but also for my career, because I absolutely love the 1675, let alone a blueberry. The 1675 was introduced in 1959 and has a steel 40mm case with crown guards. It was the first professional model to be made available with both oyster and jubilee bracelets. It had a matte dial with tritium markers. Its aluminium bezel was swiftly nicknamed Pepsi due to its sharing its colour scheme with the famous soft drink, a name which has endured to present day when describing blue and red Rolex GMT bezels. It was actually made famous by Magnum PI when Tom Selleck wore his 1675 for the duration of the series. It's also the reference worn by Che Guevara, allegedly a gift from Fidel Castro. And also Marlon Brando wore his, minus its bezel, on the film Apocalypse Now. So long story short, the 1675 is one of the hot models in the world of vintage Rolex. And that's before we even get to the blueberry aspect, the unicorn variant. So what is the blueberry? The blueberry is a 1675 with a genuine Rolex blue 24-hour bezel. And that is quite literally all we know about it. And that is why it's so fascinating. One is that it was an unofficial Rolex production model, which makes sense as the brand has been known to create a few specials. But this has since been denied by Rolex, who replied to a blueberry owner with the following: "Sir, in response to your question concerning the colour of the bezel of your watch, we would like to inform you that to our knowledge, Rolex never produced a GMT reference 1675 with an all blue bezel." Now hang on a second, that is an interesting comment, as while it denies that to modern knowledge a blueberry 1675 was ever in production, it doesn't dismiss the bezel insert as being not from the hand of Rolex, which leads to the second theory. The second theory is the blue insert was a service replacement given to customers who were unhappy that the red element on their 1675 Pepsi bezel was fading to a pink tone, which was and still is the case with aluminium inserts. It's actually a regular occurrence. We've all seen the fuchsia and the raspberry 1675s. They command much higher prices due to their bezels. But it's very possible indeed that buyers of the 1675 era were not particularly happy by the pink hue that their Pepsi was beginning to display. So they would have had the bezel switched out for an all blue at service. Another rumour is that these all blue inserts only came out of the New York service centre, which may make sense as to why there are such small numbers of them around. And the last theory that we have is that it may have been made in small numbers for the Middle Eastern market, because some configuration of Rolex watches made for the Middle East have never seen the light of day in a brand catalogue, but come in this kind of blue. So we have so many theories, and people have even theorised that the blueberry was given to the armed forces personnel, so its existence was all rather secretive and hush-hush. Some blueberries we have seen have got the UAE Air Force emblem on the dial, which would lend a lot of weight to that one. Now, the final theory that I have for you today, if you guys have any more, just pop them in the comments because I'm desperate to know. The final theory is that the blueberry originally started its life as a 1675 black bezel, but the insert had faded to blue over time. And this does happen with submariners, but honestly, I have never seen a black submariner bezel fade to this particular shade of blue. Now, if I had to pick one of the theories myself, I suspect that the service bezel theory is the closest to the mark. Now, of course, I don't have all the answers, and having pursued the mystery of the blueberry for many years, I still don't have the correct answer. But that's what makes this watch so fun, in my opinion. And what I do have in hand right here, right now, is a very, very real blueberry, 1675, and it's from 1976. The 40mm case is lovely and thick with minimal signs of polishing. You can tell from the crown guards, which are sharp, square and meaty, and the top of the lugs, which still have their original brushing on the upper surfaces. The case sides are flat with minimal distortion. With harsh polishing on these sides, it begins to distort the light and reflection, a bit like fairground mirrors. And this has none of it. No sign of softening, dishing or distortion around the lug holes in the case, and you can see that the shoulderless bars are well recessed into the lug holes. If I run my thumb along the rear of the case back is nice and sharp. One thing to be really aware of when assessing vintage cases is rounding or softening of the edges. When 4 or 5 digit GMTs and subs etc. left the Rolex factory, the undersides of their cases had a sharp, almost knife-like edge. This softens when it's over-polished. These are just a couple of ways that you can check vintage pieces out to make sure that the case is as unmolested as possible. And as you can hopefully see on our shots, this has a nice fat case. The dial is a lovely matte black radial dial with eggshell tritium lume markers. Radial dials are identifiable by smaller hour lume plots that are positioned slightly further away from the minute track than the standard dials. The tritium hands are a little lighter, but this is a par for the course, as way back when, Rolex dial and handsets were produced separately by the likes of Singer, Bezel and more. Different batches equal different compounds, which equal different discoloration and fade rates. The head is mounted on an Oyster 78360 bracelet with 580 end links and original clasp, which is tight as a drum. Now, although hollow link bracelets can suffer from stretch, keeping them clean and wearing them properly fitted reduces this to the bare minimum, and they will last for decades if looked after properly. And so, to the master of the show, the bezel, which has an authentic all blue insert which is fading really nicely. The fade here illustrates that this insert is a good couple of decades old, if not older. If you look closely at it, you can see a natural fading to the outer and inner edges of the bezel, and also around the 12, 16 and 6 and 9 numerals, likely from being rotated fairly regularly. I think it's beautiful that it's been used. Now, uneven fading like this on a bezel that has retained its top coat shine indicates a natural fade rather than chemical aging, aka people using bleach. Now, this does fade bezels, but it also eats through the top coat to leave a matte and satin finish that is even all over. Another method to false fading is to oven bake, which gives varied results but is usually responsible for the chocolate or purple brown hues on some artificial inserts. Again, the results from baking produce an even colour rather than a natural fade. So all things considered, this is a superb example of a strange and elusive watch. We don't know the real story behind the Blueberry, and likely we never will, but we have enough pieced together history to work out that if it's good enough for Ralph Lauren, it's good enough for us. Guys, what are your theories on the Blueberry? I'm desperate to hear if you've got any knowledge prior to me, so hit me in the comments and let me know, firstly, what you think of this watch, but also if you have any theories of your own. I'm no stranger to a pinch yourself moment here in Jardin du Mayfair, and this is going right up to the top. I am in love with this watch. I've probably said it too many times, but the way that the tritium goes through to the bezel, the fact that you can actually use it for tracking time zones, this is an all-round winner for me. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here at Jardin du Mayfair for this very special vintage episode. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Lastly, please, guys, hit subscribe. Up to 70% of you aren't subscribed. Please hit subscribe and I'll keep these videos coming fresh and hot every week.